Hello and welcome to another pen video from me, Penultimate Dave. So I have another inks comparison video here, and this is my favourite green inks comparison number 1 video. So I think with that, let's go and swab up some of these inks. So I get a lot of questions on how I do these ink videos. So I decided I would add this to the front of each of the ink videos. I put links in the description, but I know some of you watch this on TVs or mobile devices, so you don't get to see this. So first off, the paper is the number one question I get asked. What paper do I use for these ink comparison videos? So this is the original Tomoe River. This is 52 GSM, and it is the white, not the cream, the white. Where possible, I try to go for the white because the cream can actually change the color of the ink just a little bit. So this is Tomoe River 52 GSM in the white. A lot of people get confused as well because I have what looks to be a grid on this page, and it's actually an Oxford Optik pad. These are the pads that I actually use when I'm writing my writing samples for pen reviews or in my currently ink. So they have these little squares up here. I just use that because it's a good guide for me when I put this very thin sheet of Tomoe River over. I can actually see squares, so it helps me write a little bit sort of straight on the page. Not always, but sometimes it does. The other thing that I also have is I have a bottle of water, plain water, and I dip my nib in here. So for consistency, I use the same fountain pen, or I guess it's not a fountain pen, it's using a fountain pen nib though. This is a 3D printed pen from William Shakour in the UK. So he prints this material 3D, and it has a number 8 size Bock nib which I can unscrew, and you can see there. So it is just a dip pen holder for a number 8 size Bock nib, and the idea is I want to have consistency with the writing sample. So I use this, I dip it in the ink, I write, and then I will dip it in here and I will rinse the nib off several times and I will dry it, and then at that point I will then go on to do the next ink swatch and the next writing sample. So there you have it. That's how I do my ink swatches. So I just wanted to show you that here. Now on to the ink comparison video. So the first ink I have here today is a Cult Pens exclusive from Diamine, and it is called Livid Lime. So we'll do an ink swatch here, and you'll see that this is quite a bright neon green, and this has actually been a green that I have been liking a little bit more of lately, and I'm not normally into really neon green colours, but this one I do like. So we'll do a second pass over the top half just to show the difference between a wet or a broad or a dry or a narrow writing nib. So this is Cult Pens, and that did come out a little bit darker there. And this is Livid Lime. And I'd say that this is actually quite a nice bright green. So if you're into a nice bright summer green, then maybe this might be the ink for you. The next ink here is Monteverde, and it's Keylime Pie. So we'll do an ink swatch, and this I would say is a little bit more of the green that I really do like. Livid Lime is actually quite a neon green. This is a little bit more of a grassy bright green. We'll do a second pass over the top half just to show the difference between a wet or broad or dry and a narrow writing nib. And this is Monteverde. And it is Keylime Pie. And I've said this before, but this is an ink I really do like a lot of. I did buy the Monteverde Sweet Life collection box of ink with all of the Sweet Life inks in there. And this was an ink that I liked so much that I did actually have to go and buy another couple of bottles of because I started using it quite a lot. The next ink here is Pilot Iroshizuku and it's Chiku-rin. So we'll do an ink swatch. And this is a little bit more of an olive green, and I'm not normally partial to the olive green colour. However, I don't know what it is about this colour, but it does speak to me a little bit more. So we'll do a second pass over the top half, just to show the difference between a wet or a broad or dry or a narrow writing nib. And this is Pilot Iroshizuku. And it is Chiku-rin. But for me, it's a colour that I thought that I wasn't going to like, but I decided I do like Pilot Iroshizuku ink, so I decided that I would go and buy a few more Iroshizuku inks, and this was one that I very quickly fell in love with. And I have to say that I don't know if you can see this here, but I've used about half a bottle of ink there, so that is probably an ink that I'm going to have to replace at some point. The next ink here is Diamine Meadow. So we'll do another ink swatch. And this is where some of these inks start to get a little bit darker. You can see that here in this ink swatch. And we'll do a second pass over the top half, just to show the difference between a wet or a broad or a dry or a narrow writing nib. And move that up a little bit. This is Diamine. And it is Meadow. But this is an ink that is probably one of my go-to favourites because there's two actually, and I'll show you the other one next actually. That they are my really go-to favourite green inks nowadays that I typically use. The next one here is Diamine Apple Glory, and out of these two, I'd say that these are the inks that I gravitate at the moment towards a lot. They are what I would consider to be my favourite green inks. So we'll do an ink swatch. And Diamine Apple Glory, it is somewhat similar to Meadow, but I'd say it's almost a different green in the spectrum. We'll do a second pass over the top half, just to show the difference between a wet or broad or dry or a narrow writing nib. And this is Diamine. And it is Apple Glory. And I'd have to say this does actually remind me of green apples a lot. Certainly in the UK, you do get some sort of like, was it Granny Smith's apples? Maybe not a golden delicious type of apple, but it is a nice green. So I do gravitate a lot between Diamine Meadow and Diamine Apple Glory. And then the last ink here is a Akkerman Dutch Masters ink, and it is Van Huysum's Sapgroen. Now we'll do an ink swatch, and again, this is maybe a little bit of a lighter ink compared to the last two, but it's certainly a little bit more darker than the other three green inks above. And we'll do a second pass over the top half, just to show the difference between a wet or broad or dry or a narrow writing nib. And this is Akkerman. And it's Dutch Masters, and it's Van Huysum's Sapgroen. But that, for me is a nice, bright, grassy green ink. And in previous years, this is a go-to ink. I actually did buy 2 bottles of this because I thought I would like this green, and I really do like it. So I probably still have about 1.5 bottles of that ink, and I will probably have to start using it more. Although more lately I've been going between Diamine Apple Glory and Diamine Meadow, but I do like that Akkerman Dutch Masters Van Huysum Sapgroen. Although if I want a brighter green than that, it will probably be Monteverde Keylime Pie, or if I want a mid-green between the two, maybe Iroshizuku Chiku-rin. So I think let's now take a look at the inks here now that they have dried. So the first ink here is Cult Pen's Livid Lime. And yes, it's definitely livid. It is screaming out in its bright green colours. I did actually have a little bit of ink left actually on the C there from when I washed my nib out. Clearly there was a little bit of ink particulate still on the nib there, so the C came out a little bit of a different colour. But this is a really beautiful green ink. If you like a bright green, definitely look at Cult Pen's Livid Lime. Can you see the difference between a wet and a broad nib? Yeah, a wet or a dry nib. Yes, you can. There is a bit of difference there. Not a huge amount, but you can see a little bit. Is there shading going on? Yes, there is around these pulled areas, and you can see all around the edges there. Is there any sheen? No, it's really not an ink that would sheen, but it's a nice, bright, punchy green ink. A little bit more on the neon side, but not as neon as some neon greens can be. But if you like a bright green ink, then give that a try. You do get a lot of shading here in the writing sample though. So if you want a shading ink, definitely this is one to go for, providing you've got a wet or a broader nib. The next ink here is Monteverde Keylime Pie. And this really is my favourite light green ink more recently. Can you see the difference between a wet or a broad, a wet or a dry writing nib? I don't know why I keep saying wet or a broad. Wet or a dry writing nib. Yes, you can. There's a huge amount of difference in that colour there. Can you see shading? Yes, there's a huge amount of shading in that pulled area. You do get some shading on the writing sample. Not maybe as much as you might expect looking at the difference here in the ink swatch. But I will show you that up close there so you can see that. Is there any sheen going on? No, not really. Again, this is not really designed to be a sheening ink. So again, like most of these greens are not designed to be sheening. And I'm thinking about this. I don't think... Yeah, there are some green inks that have sheen to them, but they typically tend to be a lot more darker greens and lighter greens. The next ink here is Pilot Iroshizuku Chiku-rin, and I really thought that this was going to be an ink that I didn't like because it is more of an olive colour. However, in wet, broader nibs, you do get some nice colour there. Now, can you see the difference between a wet or a dry writing nib? Yes, you can. And you can see that if I bring that up close. Can you see shading? Yes, there is shading in the pulled area. You can definitely see that. Maybe not as much as maybe Monteverde Keylime Pie, but you're definitely seeing it there. Is there any sheen? Again, it's not an ink that is designed to sheen, so you're not really going to see sheen there. But it is a nice ink. So if you are looking for a lighter green, but you don't want something as bright as Cult Pen's Livid Lime or maybe Monteverde Keylime Pie, then maybe try Chiku-rin if you don't mind a little bit of olive in that green. The next ink is really one of my go-to inks. This is Diamine Meadow. Now, can you see the difference between a wet or a dry writing nib? Yes, you can. A huge difference. So depending on whether or not you've got a, say, a wet or a dry nib or a broad or a narrow writing nib, you're going to see a huge difference in what this colour is going to look like. Can you see shading in the pooled area? Definitely, yes, you can. There is a huge amount of shading going on there in that pooled area. Is there any sheen? I want to say it tries to sheen around the edges, but again, green inks typically do not sheen that much. So at least the green inks that I've mostly seen, there are some exceptions like Diamine Smoke on the Waters. I think also there's a Diamine exclusive falling upwards or failing upwards, I think it's called. So there are some exceptions to that rule, I guess. The next ink here is Diamine Apple Glory, and this again is another one of my go-to favorite green inks. It's just that punchy apple green color that I do like. A lot of time I do think it's more grassy green, to be honest, but definitely a crisp green apple. Can you see the difference between a wet and a dry writing nib? You definitely can. A huge difference there. So again, if you've got a wet or a broad nib, it's going to look very different than a dry or a narrow writing nib. In terms of shading, can you see shading? There's definitely quite a bit of shading in the pooled area. Maybe not as much as Diamine Meadow, but you do still get a lot of shading. Do you see it in the writing sample? Maybe a little bit there, and I'll bring that up close so you can see. But I'd say definitely you see it more in the ink swatch. Now, is there any sheen? Yes, there is some sheen around the edges of that pooled area. It's not a huge amount of sheen though, just like Diamine Meadow really, but it's a little bit of sheen. If you left this ink in a pen for maybe several months, you might see a little bit of sheen on maybe the first line that you write, but then it would probably dissipate after that. And then the last ink here is an Akkerman Dutch Masters Van Huysum's Sapgroen. Now this is an ink that I really loved, and I do ink up in some of my scribos, and I like it because it's got a lot of shading. So can you see the difference between a wet or broad, or dry or narrow writing nib? You definitely can. Again, a huge contrast there between the two colours. Can you see shading? There's definitely shading going on in that pooled area, and if I bring this up close as well, you should see some shading going on there in the writing sample as well. And then, has it got any sheen? Again, it's trying to sheen around the edges of that pooled area, but again, it's not really a sheening properties ink, so you probably are not going to see a lot of sheen from that ink. So there you have it. This is my favourite green inks comparison #1 video. If any of these inks that you like, do let me know in the comments below. Likewise, if there are any other green inks you want me to check out, do let me know in the comments below. So that's my favourite green inks comparison #1 video. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next pen video. Bye bye.